Welcome to an all new episode of Entrepreneur Conversation series on EntreJourn, a platform for all the entrepreneurs out there looking for a community to share the journey's highs and lows. EntreJourn encourages entrepreneurs to talk about their mental struggle, resilience, and help each other learn and grow from them. Today we have with us Paritosh Kumar. Paritosh has acquired his bachelor's in business administration from Symbiosis Institute of Management Studies and later pursued his MBA from Booth School of Business, University of Chicago. He has lended his expertise as product manager, product head, and product advisor at various organizations, namely Amazon, Twitch, and Gartner. He's currently the founder and CEO of Tracer, an organization that works toward envisioning a different world and improvising access to mental health. Welcome, Paritosh. Thank you for joining us today. Are the part of LGBTQ community? What does pursuing entrepreneurship while being part of an underrepresented LGBTQ community means to you, and how has it shaped you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, interestingly, when you're growing up gay in like the 2000s or 1990s and 2000s in India, um, it makes you question a lot of things, right? Which I think for most people, because homosexuality was illegal in India even until 3 years ago, when that law was struck down. So it makes you wonder if you belong here, or if there's something wrong with you, or you just don't fit into this society. So I think it's definitely it's a part of my identity that made me question everything around me, as opposed to kind of taking things for granted. Because when you're told over and over that you don't belong, like people will bully, and you'll have experiences that make you feel like you're different, or make you feel like you're not part of kind of this world. And I think that has been a huge blessing for me as an entrepreneur, because it has empowered me to not take anything for granted, and also to question everything that comes my way. So, typically people are born into a certain way of living, and they pursue that same way of living for the rest of their life, or that's what they aspire to. So for me, there was no ground to kind of stand up on in terms of having any role models of people who grew old as gay people, had relationships, or maybe had children. So I didn't know what it means to be an adult and be gay growing up. So for me, everything was I needed to define everything on my own. I needed to define my identity, my life, and what kind of life I wanted to live. And that empowered me to think very, very independently, and to think about things from the ground up, right? Like what is really true, and what is things we just make up in our mind to make our lives more convenient. And I think that has really kind of benefited me as an entrepreneur in a way, because I question everything, right? Like I don't take any assumption for granted. When I'm trying to build something new, a lot of my ideas actually come from being able to question everything, thinking from first principles, and really just thinking about fundamental problem solving. As entrepreneurs, a lot of us are often operating in environments where it may be highly regulated. And if you're not used to questioning everything all the time, then you might take the laws for granted, and you might say, okay, this is just what the laws are, and that there's no flexibility. But the fact of the matter is that the legal system is fairly flexible in terms of growing to change and looking at how the landscape is evolving. So as entrepreneurs, we also have the ability to shape the laws so that they benefit people better. And so I think for me, I always questioned the law, because the law told me that I was illegal, that I shouldn't exist. So I can think about that and say, okay, this is what the law used to be, but the laws have changed with times. And, I have a place in the world now, given the changes in the laws. And similarly for businesses, we can't take anything as set in stone. We have to really think fundamentally. So I think that's the good side of things, that independent thinking, first principles problem solving. And then the other piece is also, I think for me, I've always kind of craved that feeling of belonging somewhere, or belonging to an organization. And I think in most of my experiences, I think partly because of my identity, it was hard for me to get that feeling of belonging, right? when you work in, especially I think some of the early workplaces that I worked in India, I always have felt like an outsider, and I think like an outsider, and I feel like that has definitely impacted my journey as an entrepreneur. And I think it's given me a different lens to view the world from than I think what somebody else might.
Imposter syndrome is a common phenomenon amongst entrepreneurs. Can you share any incident where you might have experienced the same pattern of self-doubt and fear, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, that's like every new experience I've had, I feel like an imposter, right? Like, I think the first time I went to college, which was like in a new city, meeting completely different people, I felt like I was an imposter. My first few jobs, I always, because I think for me, it's like nobody in my family has ever had a job, right? Like everybody has had their own small business and they've done their own thing. So I had no idea how, people work in corporate environments, and everything just seemed so fancy to me all the time. I was like, oh wow, like I'm working for this like fancy hedge fund or this like fancy consulting firm. And so I always felt like, oh, like, I'm an outsider because in those environments, there's a certain way of doing things, and there's like some level of fanciness attached to some of these types of workplaces. So yeah, I mean, I think the way I've dealt with the imposter syndrome, I think part of it for me has been observing myself and really slowing down to even observe my own thinking, because we assume that our thoughts are true, or that whatever it is that's coming to our mind is always true. But if you take a step back and if you actually start observing your own thoughts as a third person, then you start to see that the thoughts are just thoughts. It's just like things that are running in your mind, right? Like sometimes the thoughts are telling me, oh, like I shouldn't be here. Maybe like I'm not good enough. Sometimes the thoughts are telling me that, oh, like this is too much for me. But the fact is that these are all thoughts, which is like that are getting created in our head, and our thoughts are not ourselves. So a part of dealing with the imposter syndrome for me has been just learning to observe my own thoughts, knowing that I've been in this exact same position before, and I know that it takes some time for me to get over it, and it takes some time for me to get comfortable with it. And then also at the same time, I think keeping your eye on the goal, or keeping your eye on what it is that you're going after, I think really helps kind of deal with that sense of I don't know if I'm good enough.
Entrepreneurs often struggle with prioritizing their mental health. Can you share any time in your journey where you feel exhausted, burned out, and stressed due to the nature of your work?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely burnt out and stressed, but I think especially in the initial phases of the journey, right? Like I think most founders go through a few phases until they come to like a stable state of, okay, like the ship is now sailing. So I think there is a lot of questioning that comes in, like, and I think for a lot of founders, it's also about, but like, am I working on something that's actually going to work? Like, you always have those, especially if you're trying to do something that's never been done before, that is very, very different from what is out there. There's always that question of, is this actually going to work? Is this like, am I being stupid or am I being crazy? And I think that's always like a wave pattern, right? Like there are times when you feel like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is definitely going to work. And then there are other times when things aren't moving as quickly and you feel like maybe it's not going to work. So I think managing that up and down and that wave pattern is definitely a big part of early stage entrepreneurship for me. And the way I do it is, again, I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, observing my thought process, observing my thoughts, and realizing that all of this is just thoughts. It is not the truth. It is not reality. It's my brain trying to push me to take some action in some direction. Because at the end of the day, like our brains are designed for survival, right? So our brains are always trying to think through all different possibilities, and at some points it'll tell us, oh, this is amazing, and then like other points it's going to tell us it's not. So how do you keep that balance? And I think, so for me, like observing the thought process and being clear about what does it mean that this is going to work or not work, right? Like actually writing it down and saying, these are the metrics I want to track. This is how I'm going to assess my market fit. Is the product a good fit for the market or not? And then also knowing when is the right time to say, okay, like maybe this is not going to work, but I need to know that conclusively instead of being in this like up and down wave pattern. So I think that clarity is definitely what has helped me manage my own mental health, and that is what has helped me with dealing with these ups and downs that come in as part of entrepreneurship. The other thing that I think I'm a big believer in and supporter of is sleep. I think I find that, and I think different people have different takes on how hard you need to work at a startup. For me, I do my best work when I've had my 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And if I've had like less than that, then I'm not going to be as productive and as clear headed as I would be. So I don't compromise on, like, I very rarely compromise on sleep in life. And there will be some times when maybe I go through like 2 3 days when I'm working a little bit more than that. But sleep is a big part of that mental health for me. Another piece is connectedness. I think entrepreneurship can be a very lonely journey. And again, from a mental health standpoint, like if you're not interacting with a lot of people for work on a daily basis, it can feel fairly isolating and it can make you question a lot of things. So I think reaching out to other entrepreneurs, building some support group, watching some content about other entrepreneurs online, all of that helps kind of stay connected.
Self-care routines which you follow to maintain your mental health?
Hmm. Yeah. So self-care wise, for me, working out every day is super important. So that's something that I try to never skip at all. So I'll do like, as soon as I wake up, 1 hour of workout in the morning is important. Recently, I also started taking ashwagandha, which is a big part of my self-care routine as well. And I think that definitely helps with clarity, with quality of sleep, quality of attentiveness, managing stress and anxiety. So that's been a great addition. Sleep, I already talked about, is like my favorite thing for self-care is sleep. I think good sleep is uh, absolutely necessary for everybody, and it helps me as an entrepreneur tremendously. Yeah, and then the last thing that's important to me is just like community and investing in community, in relationships with my team, but also with like other like-minded people.
What advice or tips would you like to give the upcoming or established entrepreneurs out there to maintain their work-life balance, build up their mental strength, and protect their mental health?
Hmm. I mean, I would say my biggest advice is observing your thoughts and being able to look at your thoughts as not yourself, but as ideas that are created in your mind. Like your mind is a physical organ just like any other part of your body, right? So let's say if you have a cut on your foot, you're going to look at it and you're going to think, oh, this is a cut on my foot, like here's what I should do to fix that. Similarly with the mind, I think building a practice or a habit of observing the mind, observing thoughts, and thinking critically about, is this actually true or is this something that my mind is just creating? And being able to have that relationship with your own mind, I think, is super important for mental health, because it gives you some sense of understanding how your brain works, understanding that your thoughts are not you, and that you can also learn to distance yourself from your thoughts and say, okay, I know this is what my brain wants to do right now, or this is what my brain wants to think right now, but I know that that is not true, and here's why. So you can have that self conversation. Is almost like doing your own cognitive behavioral therapy, and you can get back in touch with what is really true, and go back to working on your goals, so you're not like constantly getting caught up in the voices of your mind. And then I think the other thing to me is finding a way to not attach yourself too much by the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey that happens on a day-to-day basis. And this is like easier said than done, because I deal with it every day and it's not as easy. But I think maintaining some level of objectivity, some level of clarity in your mind about uh, what those ups and downs mean for your company. Uh, and I think, you get a little bit of practice dealing with that in the beginning of the journey. And then I think if people can just learn from those experiences and then not let that affect them on a day-to-day basis, I think is extremely helpful to maintain your work-life balance, maintain your relationships, and to keep working on what it is that you're working on. And then, the usual tips I talked about: sleep, good hygiene, and sort of eating good food again is extremely important. And like diet has been a big part of the change that I've brought into my life in terms of, we grow up eating kind of a lot of the same stuff, I think, in India. And for me, like changing my diet to like a low gluten and high protein kind of medium carb type diet has definitely been very helpful in maintaining my energy levels throughout the day, being able to think better. Yeah.
Mental health and physical health are definitely correlated.
Yeah. I think they both affect. A lot of the research today is saying that, what you think actually affects your physical health, and how you treat your body affects your mind as well. So, I mean, like I said, the mind is another organ in the body, and it's as connected to everything else as any part of your body. So, it's all interrelated. It's all correlated, and I think maintaining that balance of that sense of balance is definitely important.
Definitely. Thank you for your time, Paritosh. We are extremely grateful to you. We hope this interview would help our audience to understand the struggle and importance of mental health and talk about it. With this, we have come to an end of this episode of our conversation series. Do like, share, and hit the subscribe button down below for further updates.